Welcome back to the Preppy Podcast. Thank you all so much for listening today. As always, I have a really fun guest. It is a Retta Jane and her brand, Retta Jane, which is for those tweens, the in-between girl years, where you're not necessarily wearing clothes that have cartoon characters on them or something too precious, but you're also not wearing, what a teenager is wearing. So she creates a really stylish clothes for that age gap. And honestly, so many of the pieces I want for myself, which she talks about how she's creating a little capsule for adults as well. But it's just such well-made, classic, beautiful pieces. So I'm really excited to share this interview with you. But before we get into that, a lot of exciting things happening coming up for the Preppy Podcast. The first is that today, when this episode comes out, May 27th, I will be in Dallas, Texas at the Lily Sadugi store with Lily herself from 4 to 7 p.m. We'll be there for shopping and styling, getting everyone ready for a summer of preppy. So you guys know I loved that episode with Lily. So this is your chance to come and meet her and shop with her and also meet me and some fellow Preppy Podcast listeners. It's open to the public, so feel free to bring a friend, tell a friend. We'd love to see you all there. Next, I have an upcoming podcast live panel event, and that's going to be in Newport, Rhode Island at 10:30 in the morning at Hammett's Hotel. So you guys know that I've been doing these live panels where essentially I am interviewing a handful of preppy entrepreneurs and business owners, and then during that as well, we'll be recording so that you guys, if you're not able to make it to Newport, you can listen and watch after the fact. So that's going to be a really great event, and that's on June 5th at 10:30 at Hammett's Hotel. For that panel, I have Tyler Bowe, I have CK Bradley, I have Kylie McHugh, who's an amazing real estate agent there, and also she is the founder of Newport Ladies Book Club, which is just so amazing. You have to check out that book club on Instagram for sure. And Lauren Hope, who I've never had on the podcast, but I love her jewelry and have many of her pieces, so I'm so thrilled to have her on that panel. So definitely, if you're local to Newport, please come June 5th, 10:30 a.m. at Hammett's Hotel right there in downtown Newport, and I'd love to see you there. Then finally, a reminder about Camp Preppy. Tickets are on sale at thepreppypodcast.com, and Camp Preppy is July 14th and 15th. It's essentially adult preppy summer camp, so we're going to be doing all sorts of preppy activities like needlepoint, mahjong, watercolors, just a time to connect with other preppy fans. You don't have to have a business, so that's a question I've been receiving. You could be a stay-at-home mom. You could be someone who's more on the corporate track. You do not have to have a preppy business to attend. You don't have to be an influencer to attend. It's open to anyone, but there's only 20 tickets total for that. So definitely get yours while you can. It's just going to be a great time to kind of go back to girlhood, connect, unwind, and enjoy some preppy activities. So all the information on that is on thepreppypodcast.com. So without further ado, I know that was a lot, but let's get into this week's episode. All right. So why don't you let everyone know who you are, where you live, and what you do?
Hi, everybody. My name is Retta Tussie. I'm actually in St. Louis, Missouri. I'm a Midwest girl, and I have a brand called Retta Jane, and it is a clothing line for adolescent girls. So we joke that it's a love letter to the in-between years, those ages where they're kind of growing out of children's wear, but they're not quite ready for women's wear.
Definitely. And your pieces are so beautifully done. I saw them at the Southern Sea in person and got to meet you there, which is how I got to know you. And I was like, I want all of this for myself, honestly. So I'm thrilled to talk more with you about, how your brand got started, where it is today and everything. But let's start at the beginning. Tell me a little bit about you as a kid. Were you creative? Were you entrepreneurial? Were you always into fashion even at a young age?
That's yes, and yes. I was always a creative kid. And in fact, I always joke my very first job was creating earrings out of clay when I was in grade school. So I would make little clay. I mean, they were ridiculous looking back at it, but little clay animals or polar bears. And it was the type of clay that you could harden in the oven. So I
Okay.
would make the animals, put them in the oven, and then I would I guess, hot glue the backs to them. But I still remember my grandmother was very chic, and she would always sport these obnoxious clay earrings that I would make as if they were the most chic things in the entire world. So yes, I've always kind of had this itch to create and to be, express myself through clothing. It's just kind of runs through the genes.
Definitely. Oh my gosh, that's one of my favorite questions because I love hearing about people's like first little businesses when they were kids. I think everyone like I need to make a collage, and people have to send me pictures of what those first businesses were because I find it so interesting and like so fun and creative.
Well, and I think it's true. Those that have that entrepreneurial itch or spirit, it
Mhm.
does tend to start very young and continues on through their life. Like there's just never a moment where I'm not creating and kind of thinking outside the box that way.
Totally. I mean, I think it's has a lot to do with creativity. Like I would always make I'd paint clay pots and sell them at the end of our driveway with spider plants in them. But I also remember just growing up in like middle school and high school asking my mom if I could like dust or Windex to get a couple extra dollars to go to the mall and buy something at Abercrombie because I was so driven by like fashion. I needed those new jeans or like that new t-shirt.
Well, I remember I can tell you where I was when I first received a 17 magazine. So that will date me. But we were on a road trip and my mother, I must have been in, middle school age,
Oh yeah.
and my mother picked up a few things at the gas station as a treat for my brother and for me. And one of them was a 17 magazine, and my world stopped.
Oh my gosh.
I was enamored and I couldn't get enough of the fashion. It was like opening a door to a world that I had not seen before.
Mhm.
And I think that was it was just a major influence. Again, at my age, I still remember getting that magazine.
I love that. Oh my gosh, I love a good physical magazine. So tell me a little bit about them when it came time for college. If you went, where and what did you end up studying? Was it something relating to fashion or something creative?
Well, so ish, kind of. So I always joke my father is the most pragmatic father. He's amazing. But he studied chemistry and then had his MBA, and he's very much of the liberal arts mind. Like you need a good solid background and then go do your whatever you want.
Yeah.
So I was eyeing something creative in art school, and my dad was like, "Man, why don't you just go get a liberal arts degree and figure it out?" So I was very much lost in the college process. I did not know what I wanted to do.
Mhm.
This was in the 90s, late 90s. And so, we didn't have the luxury of the internet where you could
Mhm.
see all these different facets of design and careers. I remember my college counseling department was like, "Oh, I don't know, you could do graphic design." Like they just didn't know. So I ended up following my brother. I have a brother who's 2 years older, and he went to Miami of Ohio. And I had visited him there. And it was kind of that typical college experience. If anybody's
Mhm.
been there, it's the most beautiful campus and it looks like it's cut out of a movie. So it's like, well, I guess that's where I'll go to
Yeah.
school. And I'll just get the college experience and figure it out. So I went to Miami and ended up over, I guess by sophomore year, kind of falling into their interior design program. So they have a really great architecture department, and one of the tracks is interiors. So it was a well encompassed program where we would do structural engineering and some of the classes with the architecture students,
Mhm.
and then break off into an interior concentration. So I always laugh, it's applicable skills to fashion and
Yeah.
yet still very different.
Yeah, no, I totally think there's so much in the world of interiors that's similar to fashion in terms of, fabrics, patterns, but a lot of the trends overlap these days too, I'd say, right?
Absolutely, and there's so much psychology to the interior
Yeah.
side when you're getting to know your clients and kind of extracting what their personality is, and I think that really applies to fashion too and how you look at a garment, more than just from aesthetics.
Yeah, no, definitely. So then after college, you have this degree then in interior design. What was kind of like your career journey before launching your own brand and business?
Well, I laugh that my life should be a Waze app. I think it might be, and it's like detour, detour, reroute
Yeah.
to get me to where I am today. So I actually interned during the summers in New York in the fashion world. So I had great internships at Betsy Johnson and then Tommy Hilfiger. And at Tommy, I was in their home department. So I
Okay.
kind of got this bridge of what the fashion world was like, but also how to apply it to interiors. And my intention was to move to New York and live there.
Yeah.
And the intricacy of this was because I had joined the interior major during my sophomore year, I walked with my graduating class in May of 2001, but had one class to make up.
Okay.
And so I moved to New York that summer. I worked as a freelance designer for Tommy with the intention of going back to Ohio, taking that one class, and then coming back for my job. Well, I did that summer, and then it was 9/11.
Oh my
So
gosh.
that fall, so I was in Ohio when that happened. And then, as you can imagine, over the course of the following months, the idea was, please do not move up to New York right now. I mean, the world was in such chaos, especially in New York. So I ended up moving back to St. Louis in December of 2001, kind of lost, and not, I mean, again, the world was in flux at that point too. So I moved back to St. Louis, kind of bounced around trying to find a job. It was very hard to find a creative position at that time. And I had been freelancing and illustrating for people. So I ended up starting a stationery company kind of out of the blue. And it was called Retta Ritz, which is a play on my maiden name. And I had that stationery company for maybe, oh goodness, 6 years, something like that. And it was great fun, but I created it from scratch. But we were sold in Kate's Papery and Paper Source. I mean,
Wow.
it really was. I mean,
Like a legit business.
it was a legitimate business, and I did it from scratch. But again, I was very young and very green and didn't know a lot about what I was doing. And so when the economy started to crash in 2008, I saw the writing on the wall, and I just was not positioned to stick it out.
Yeah.
So that's when I ended up going into interiors, residential interiors here in St. Louis.
Oh my gosh, I love that. So seriously, then entrepreneurship runs through your veins, really, I think, right?
It really does.
So then tell me a little bit about your interior design business, because I know you still do that. And then kind of how that almost led into, your fashion brand and the beginning of that.
I've been very blessed to have a great career here in St.
Mhm.
Louis.
Mhm.
I've had phenomenal clients that have let me think outside the box and kind of all different realms, from very traditional to very modern. And so I've built this brand and book of business here in St. Louis over the years. I I guess it was about 2017. I actually had been married, divorced during all of this time. And then I met my future husband, Tom. So this would have been around 20, I guess we married in 2017. So to kind
Okay.
of create this breadth of career.
Yeah.
So we married. I had two stepchildren now, and then I was pregnant with my first child with Tom. And life just started getting very busy. And quite candidly, I started to get very burnt out.
Mm.
And I was just like, I need a break. I
Mhm.
had been grinding and grinding, and the interiors, it was losing its luster.
Yeah.
So I decided once the baby came that this was it. I needed to take a break and just take a breath.
Mhm.
So I did, and it was wonderful. And so Charlie came in 2018, and I didn't work for a little bit, but I had this itch. I had this itch to do something more in the product world again.
Okay.
And it was very interesting. My stepdaughter at the time was young, and my father-in-law passed away. And I told my husband, don't worry, I'll go out and I'll get the clothes for the kids for the service. And I came back at the end of the day completely defeated. I mean, we're in a rather large city.
Yeah.
And I came back and I said, Tom, I cannot find anything appropriate for Lola that does not have glitter and unicorns
Mm.
or is tight and is like way too mature for her. I said,
Mhm.
why isn't anybody making something for these kids that bridges the gap? There were plenty of things if she had been 8 years old and younger.
Mhm.
And there were plenty of things had she been a teenager. But there was this gap. And I said, I just can't figure out. At that point, too, I would have spent any amount of money because I'm like, I just need to find something
Something.
appropriate. And so that started the conversation. And so then by the time I had Charlie, I would still kind of go back. This was always in my mind. It was like an
Yeah.
itch I couldn't scratch. And it was my husband that looked at me and said, why don't you look into that more? Like, you keep going back to this. see if there really is a gap in the market or if
Yeah.
you're missing something. And so that's how the conversation around Retta Jane began. That was its genesis.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I feel like, watching Shark Tank, and reading so many entrepreneurship books, it is, you're really supposed to look for that gap in the market. Like, what's something that you need and you're not finding it, and then create that, right? And so that's essentially how you started and what you did here.
That's exactly right. And I kept thinking I was missing something. Like,
Yeah.
certainly somebody is working on this core group, because it
Yeah.
seemed so obvious to me by that point that something was missing. And what I've learned and what I continue to learn is the market for girls. I always say, so our sizes are 8 to 16.
Okay.
I say our sweet spot is ages 7 to 13, roughly.
Mhm.
It's trend driven. Everything is trend driven for
Mhm.
those girls, which is
Mhm.
great. I mean, I joke that I'm not going to get them out of their Lululemon pants. Like, I know there's a time and place, but there are also occasions for which you need to dress appropriately.
Yes.
And what we come up against in the market are those very tight or cropped outfits that, in
Mhm.
my opinion, our girls aren't quite ready for. I think
Yeah.
we're growing up so fast anyway. My intention is to put the brakes on a little bit
Yeah.
and dress them in a fashion forward way,
Yeah.
but that is still embracing that youthfulness for a little bit longer.
Definitely. So tell me about then, from coming up with this idea to then sourcing, fabrics, coming up with patterns, coming up with what your silhouettes look like, and launching it, putting it out there into the world. How long was that timeline, and sort of what did that journey look like for you?
That journey was chaos, Patricia. I will tell you, I joke that I've had more excuses, like more times I should have quit than to push forward, but I just continue moving on. But I would say the conversation had been years in the works, and then by
Mhm.
2019, I actually put pedal to the metal to start putting this together.
Okay.
And when we started out of the gate, I actually wanted to create this on demand. So there was a factory, domestic factory, that was new, but I had a peer, a friend who was a designer that was working with them, and they were creating garments on demand, meaning as a consumer, you could go onto the website, you could order the dress from Retta Jane,
Okay.
and it would be made once you order,
Uh-huh.
and then it would be shipped to you within 10 days.
Oh, wow.
It was incredible.
Yeah.
And I visited this factory, they were legit. They almost ran it like a conveyor belt. I mean, it
Okay.
was systematic,
Mhm.
but very well done. They had great quality. So I said, "This is amazing to produce domestically,
Yeah.
like, oh, this would be phenomenal." So I also just started making cold calls, and I reached out to friends who were designers. I tried to learn anything and everything that I could. The CFDA out of New York has a great resource library on their website. So
Mhm.
I started using that. And I have to tell you, I was pleasantly surprised. Everybody picked up the phone. And
Nice.
people were very willing to give me information and to help me out.
Yeah.
So that's how I started the journey. I leaned on friends, and I leaned on anybody I could connect with in the industry who was willing to kind of point me in the right direction.
Yeah. And I mean, that's a great resource that you just shared, with the CFDA. I think, they have a great, and even if you're a member, you get a whole directory of members listing everyone's, email address, phone number, like, and high up people too. It's impressive.
So I thought, this is wonderful. Everything is going well. This was 2019, and I had a direction. And then I was pregnant with my second child.
Okay.
So this would have been the fall of 2019. It gets to the point that my physician said, "You need to stop traveling. Like, you need to put the brakes on this." And I thought, but
Mhm.
no, I want to launch. I want to launch in the spring of 2020. This is my goal. This is my intention. He goes, "Time out. The baby is not going to give you any wiggle room here." Like,
Yeah.
his deadline is his deadline. He said, "Why don't you just take a beat, have the baby, get back into Retta Jane?" I thought, okay, I'll do that. Well, as everybody knows, spring of 2020 was COVID.
Yeah.
So, I mean, again, things happen for a reason. So I
Mhm.
had my second child in January of 2020, and by the time I was kind of coming out 6 weeks later from all of that, the world shut down.
Yeah.
So I moved the office became my dining room. I had a newborn. We all hunkered down at home, but I continued to forge ahead with Retta Jane. But of course, during this time, as you can imagine, my pattern maker dropped me. People stopped answering the phone. It started getting very chaotic. But I did not stop. So I would pick up the phone and I would cold call pattern makers in New York and cold email them. And I would say, this is what I was doing. And inevitably one answered the call. And he is still my pattern maker today.
Oh,
He's
that's
phenomenal.
amazing.
Amazing. He's just phenomenal and was willing to work with me remotely. And this was the beginning of remote work.
Yeah.
So, and then I had a girlfriend here in town who's a brilliant fashion designer. Her name is Audra. She has a women's wear line. She has a great background. So she took me under her wing too. So we just brought everything kind of in-house. We started doing our patterns with Alex in New York. We started doing all of our fittings here in St. Louis. I mean, it was not easy, and it definitely took 3 times the length it should have.
Yeah. Putting the puzzle pieces together.
That's exactly right. But again, little by little, we started to continue the conversation. And by that fall, I'm trying to get the timeline right. Yeah, it was by that fall, we were working with this domestic factory and we're like, hey, we're ready to go.
Yeah.
All of our raw materials were there. We're like, we're ready to send you the check to make the samples. And then crickets. We're like, something is wrong. Something is like, we just spidey senses. Something is happening here. Well, within a couple days, we get an email. We've closed. Sorry. We've completely shut down.
Yeah.
No. So it was a week before Christmas. I called my insurance agent. I'm like, what do I do? I've got all my stuff. He goes, you get in the car and you drive down there. It was in Alabama.
Okay.
I drove. My mother went with me. We hopped in the car and we literally drove to the factory the next day to go pick up, because we didn't know if they were going into bankruptcy or if we didn't know anything. So we just went down, knocked on the door. I put all of my raw goods back in the back seat of my car.
Oh my gosh.
And then drove back to St. Louis. So by the end of 2020, I had patterns, I had the buildings of a business and the website. All of these things were churning. And then I had no factory.
Nowhere to get them produced at this point. Yeah.
That's exactly right. So that's how I ended 2020.
Okay.
And then as things go, I could have quit. Most of my friends were like, oh, it was a good shot, Retta, but move on. No, I feel like this thing has legs. So I still wanted to produce on demand. So I started doing some research. There was a brand out of New York called Misha Nunu, a designer, and she produced on demand. And she had been in Forbes and a couple other magazines. And it was like, okay, somebody else is doing this. I go onto LinkedIn, and I always say this is for anybody starting a business out there. LinkedIn is the best resource. I started I put in Misha Nunu. Who do I know? Do I have anybody that's connected? Lo and behold, I had one friend with whom I had not conversed in probably a decade or more that was connected to somebody at Misha. And anyway, I ended up writing her. She connected me. Within a week, the COO of Misha Nunu picked up the phone.
Oh my God.
And we were having a conversation. I mean, it was just that easy. And she was willing to take the call. And they were phenomenal. And she kind of walked me through what they do for on demand. She connected me with their factory. And then it turned out they were going to do see, now I can't think of the word. I know what it was. So they were testing a beta program to bring other designers in to do on-demand work with them.
Okay.
And they ended up putting me in that beta group.
Amazing.
So within a month, I had no factory and nothing to go with. And then by the end of January of 21, I was like, this is great. I have a new factory now, and we're talking about on-demand. We're off to the races. We're back. And so we started working with this factory. They were based out of China, but it's women. It was a woman-owned factory. She's still a mentor and a big part of me and my business to this day. And they were producing on demand. So we started going down that road. And to give you the short version of it, we hit another fork in the road by the end. We were gonna launch in back to school 2021.
Okay.
And in July of 2021, they had to end the beta program for various reasons.
Okay.
And so here I am left again with I'm like, oh my gosh, we're ready to go. And I can't produce. I don't
Yeah.
know what's happening. So I ended up staying on with the factory, the lovely
Okay.
factory. They could not produce on demand anymore. Again, it was just, it was, again, kind of the time period. We're coming
Yes.
off, we're still kind of in the midst of COVID. There's
Mm-hmm.
all these factors that came into play, and it just was not feasible.
Mm-hmm.
So the factory said, well, we would still love to work with you, but we're going to have to just produce inventory.
Yeah.
So in August of 2021, I paused everything because then I had to rethink what I'm doing. I went from an on-demand business model to completely switching over to an inventory-based, more traditional fashion model.
Yeah, I mean, well, with on demand, there's less cost involved with that, right? Less overhead. So you completely have to redo a business plan and rethink all of that.
That is exactly right. So by the fall of 21, again, from the product perspective, we were ready to go. But now from the business model perspective, we had to completely flip.
Yeah.
Another time where all of my friends were like, good try, Retta, but just let it go. This is clearly not working. I was like, no, I believe in it. And I really believed in this gap in the market and filling it. So over the course of the next year, we redid the business model. We dealt with all of those post-COVID hiccups with supply chain issues, rolling back blackouts in mainland China. I mean, it really was this roller coaster of events that we would have very high highs and very low lows.
Mm-hmm.
Kept forging ahead. And finally, by spring of 23, we were ready. We were ready to go, ready to launch. So we had a small launch event here in the fall of 22 to kind of introduce the brand to here in St. Louis to friends and family. And then our website went live May 1st, 2023. Finally.
Yes. You're like, oh gosh.
Finally.
So when it went live, then what did you have on the web? Like how many styles? What did these silhouettes look like?
So we had quite a few. I'm trying to think even now what kind of numbers we have. I want to say maybe we had 15 to 20 styles when we launched, and we continue to kind of add things into it. We had a good breadth of variety when we launched. And we launched doing trunk shows. We made a little catalog that we sent out. It was really, we're learning as we go.
Yeah.
It was a lot of word of mouth. And our intention was to start wholesale. So we launched D2C in the spring.
Yeah.
And then we were leaning into going to market that fall.
Okay.
So that fall and winter, we actually went overseas. We went to Italy and we went to Paris to show the European markets because we always felt like Retta Jane had this European sensibility to it.
Yeah.
So we went to the European markets and we had a great response from a press perspective.
Okay.
A lot of press mentions and pickup. And we were even selected to be in like the new now in the Paris market, which was one of 10 brands that was new, showcasing for the first time. So it was a great launch, but a lot of the response we had was great. We love this. We love the look. Come call us after you've been around for a couple of years. It's like the chicken and the egg.
Yeah. Yeah.
We want to make sure that you have the capabilities we want to make sure you have the capabilities of distribution in Europe and in Asia. And we did, but it wasn't perfected by any means at this rate.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of just conversation and learning.
No, go ahead. I mean, even if you're getting no's from a store perspective, at least you're hearing feedback, right? So I think a lot of times when brands go to various markets for the first time, I feel like they actually don't really have that many sales initially out of the gate, but they learn a ton and then they go back even better and like more prepared the next time, right?
That's exactly right. And that is truly what we were hearing. So I always say it was a big investment to go overseas, but I wouldn't have known. I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yeah.
And in hindsight, it was still worth it going to market because, again, we learned just a breadth of information, not only on the market, but on the response to our brand, where retailers thought there was value, where maybe we had to make some changes.
Mm-hmm.
So we came to New York. We did a New York market right after, right after Europe.
Okay.
And same kind of conversation. But what we did take away from New York, there was a wonderful showroom that represented a lot of the European brands. So Chloe and Armani, I mean, the higher end, our product price point is more of the luxury market.
Yep.
So we had a conversation with a similar showroom. And he was lovely and gave us great perspective and had wonderful things to say about our quality, about our designs.
Mm-hmm.
But he said, here's the deal. You're brand new. You're not Chloe. You're not Armani. Nobody knows who you are. He said, my recommendation to you is to take a beat, pause from the wholesale. He said, go start doing boots on the ground. He said, you're going to have so much more traffic if you start building your audience person by person.
Yeah.
And he goes, start doing trunk shows. He goes, the retailers will pick you up. He said, but I think you need to reverse engineer this.
Yeah.
You're going really big right out of the gate. He goes, and I applaud that. That's an entrepreneurial mindset.
Yeah.
I think you need to take a beat and go backwards.
Mm.
So that's what we did.
Okay.
And we just rethought how we were doing this. And so then we started flipping the script, doing more boots on the ground, trunk shows, social media, and approaching that way, which has been great.
Yeah. So I'm curious then, based off of that, sort of what do you think has been the best in terms of marketing for your brand?
It hands down word of mouth.
Yeah.
What we have found is that Retta Jane doesn't quite have a home yet. And that's a very candid answer to share. But we are too old for children's wear stores.
Yeah.
Most of the children's wear tops out at size 8 or 10, and we start at 8, size 8. We are too young for women's wear, but we're also too sophisticated for most tween stores. Tween stores tend to be trend driven, which we are not.
Yeah.
So when you put Retta Jane in a store next to a crop top or something with a cutout or short and tight, I mean, the truth of the matter is a lot of the girls, their eye goes straight to that trend-driven piece, even to the dismay of the parents if they don't want them to go that direction. So we have a lot more success when we are popping up in women's wear stores, for example. We've done a lot of women's wear pop-ups where we can bring in mothers and daughters and have the conversations about dressing for oneself without necessarily leaning into what all of your friends are doing.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, I think your home then is really the website and the social media, because you're able to fully tell the brand story and, what sets you apart really in the market.
That's exactly right. And it's great because I always say when they find us, they love us. I mean, we did one show in Houston and mothers were buying multiple of the exact same dress in different colors. Like, you get it.
Yeah.
You get it.
Yeah.
And so there's no selling. I think there's a lack of innocence in the market, and our girls are growing up fast. And I know there's a lot of ways we can't stop that.
Yeah.
But to me, it's how can we just hold on to that sense of youth for just a little bit longer. They're going to they're going to wear the short, tight things inevitably, and we're not going to be able to stop it necessarily. But I grew up with a Southern mother, and it was always about dressing for oneself, dressing appropriately. And so that's what we're trying to instill into this line.
Definitely. And, even though it's not trend driven, I would say it's not cutesy though. I would say it's fashion forward for that. Like I said, I would want to wear some of these pieces myself. So I think it's fashion forward. And that's what I really love about it. So I'm curious, obviously it sounds like the hardest part maybe is like the wholesale and was getting everything off the ground. But what's your favorite part about having this business then? What's the best part?
I love the conversations that I'm having with mothers and daughters. One of the pain points that I found in this market was when they would be looking for something together. Let's say it was a dress for the cotillion dance or an upcoming piano recital, these events that are important in the girl's life. And the mother would say to me, we went out on a Saturday and we were both so excited when we left the house. We're like, this is going to be so much fun. We're going to go find this dress. She said, by the time we came home, we were both in tears and there were arguments and it just wasn't happening. And so when we come into the picture, the mother and the daughter are shopping together. They are both leaving with smiles on their face.
Mm-hmm.
The girl feels like somebody was designing for them.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't for their little sister. It wasn't for the older echelon of the market. It was for them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's seeing, it sounds a little cheesy, but it's seeing these little girls light up.
Yeah.
And finding something that they can feel their best in, because let's be honest, it is middle school and that transitional time for a girl, a little bit before middle school too.
Yeah.
That is hard.
The worst times.
Time. And we grew up in a world without social media.
I can't imagine.
I was joking. If Sarah was doing something, I didn't know. And so it didn't affect me. And these girls have to carry all of that weight on them now.
Yeah.
And so this is our chance to just take a little bit of the pressure off.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that is the best part. It really is. It's making these little girls feel seen and special.
Yep. No, I love that so much. So I'm curious, you shared a great resource earlier in the episode. Any other resources that you can share with listeners if they have a business, whether it's a great book you read that really inspired you or had great advice, a networking group, a newsletter, another, resource?
My advice is to just be continuously learning.
Mm-hmm.
I am really quick to surround myself with people that know a lot more than me.
Mm-hmm.
I think I have great ideas and I'm creative, but I don't know what I'm doing half the time. It's always a continual learning. I am continuously learning as I build this business.
Yeah.
So, I joined the Southern Sea. We talked about that. We mentioned that earlier.
Mm-hmm.
That's been a phenomenal resource, which is a consortium of women business owners who are very willing to open up their Rolodexes and have these candid conversations about the vulnerabilities of starting a business, how we can support one another. So that's been great. I had a great business coach. It was called The Brim. Yeah. And I'm still in communication with her now. But Sally, who owns The Brim, is a phenomenal resource. And she helped me kind of change that perspective on sales when we were coming out of the wholesale market, which I didn't have on my own. And then I always say, look for classes. So this would have been early on in the conversation about Retta Jane. I took classes at Washington University here in St. Louis. I took a nightly sewing class through their costume department and a pattern making class. And I joke it was not so that I could do the pattern making or the sewing, but so that I could speak the language.
Yeah.
So when I go out there, I'm not completely ignorant when I'm speaking with my suppliers.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm speaking with my suppliers and when I'm speaking with our vendors, I want to have the language.
Yeah.
And so that's another thing. In fact, I'm taking classes right now at Parsons as well at a business of fashion to get a certificate. It's not that I am going back for my MBA or anything, but I want as much information as I can have so that I can communicate in this industry as we drive forward.
I think that's a great advice. I'm someone very similar. I love to continue to learn. And so I think, like you mentioned, a great resource is look at your local colleges and universities, see if you can sign up for a class relating to your business or even just an interest, something that you've been wanting to learn. I think that's excellent advice.
Well, and even the community colleges. We have an incredible community college here in St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you'll think you want to do something and you get into the class and you go, oh, wait, I don't love this as much as I thought it was. It's not as glamorous, or it's not, it's not the sweet spot that I thought. And you can pivot and you can kind of dip your toe in the water, which I think is really, really valuable.
Definitely. I agree 1,000%. So since this is the Preppy Podcast, I always ask everyone, what does Preppy mean to you? So how would you describe Preppy?
Preppy to me is actually, I think of it as classic. So, and you know what, we didn't even get into the background of Retta Jane, so I'll do that really quick.
Yeah.
So thinking of Preppy to me is classic and traditional.
Mhm.
So Retta Jane is actually my full name. It's Retta, and then Jane is my middle name.
Okay.
But it's also my mother's name and my grandmother's name. So
Oh.
the three of us are all Retta Jane. And my mother and my grandmother both had little stints in the fashion industry on the buying side. They both modeled, and they saved their wardrobe. So there are things that I would say a third of my wardrobe today was that of my mother and grandmother,
Oh,
which is
wow.
a lot of the inspiration for the brand.
Oh.
Preppy to me isn't like the preppy handbook from the 80s. Like, to
Mhm.
me, I don't necessarily think of it as a look. I think
Mhm.
of it as a mindset. My
Mhm.
grandmother and my mother were very keen on dressing for themselves and
Uh-huh.
dressing against the trends. And that's what I take preppy as.
Yeah.
So a lot of the things I wear today were my mother's and my grandmother's, and they are still as classic and relevant today as they were in the 40s and 60s. Like just yesterday, I wore a bright Kelly green wrap skirt from the 60s that my grandmother made for my mother, and it had these giant pink hippos on it.
Oh
I
my
mean, it's quirky
God.
and
Fun.
preppy.
Yes.
Everybody stopped me on the street. I mean, our mail lady stopped me, and she's like, "Is that Tory Burch? What is that?" I'm like, "No, it's from the 60s. It's quirky, and it's to me that's preppy. It's just
That's
dressing for
so
oneself."
preppy. Oh my gosh, I need to see a picture of this skirt. It sounds amazing.
We might have to bring it back. Enough people stopped us yesterday. I'm like, we might have to do this for Retta Jane.
Totally. Oh my gosh, I love that story. I'm named after my mom and grandmother as well, so I'm the third Patricia. Um, yeah, yeah, and I often talk about how, my grandmother, I feel like she influences me with style and, gave me, unfortunately, a love of shopping too. Totally. So who would be a dream customer for you? If you could have anyone, dress their daughter in Retta Jane, or there's a particular, young woman that you'd like to see in Retta Jane, who would it be?
Oh, we'd love to dress Princess Catherine, Kate and William's daughter. I feel like she epitomizes the look of Retta Jane, that tailored classic innocence, but still fashion forward.
Mhm.
But I will share a little tease with you.
Mhm.
So we have heard a lot from the mothers and the aunts and the grandmothers when the little girls are trying that on. Oh my gosh, I would totally wear this too. I wish you had this in my size. And so we are going to do a women's wear capsule coming this fall.
Ooh.
It's not the same exact breadth of Retta Jane.
Mhm.
These are definitely made for women, but you will see a nod to some of the styles we have from our children's wear.
Oh my gosh, I am so excited. Are you gonna do a beautiful I know you have a great cape, Jack, are you gonna do something like that?
Yes, the cape will be back. That is our signature piece, and that cape is based on a wool cape of my grandmother's from the 40s that I think is the most glorious piece of clothing ever created.
Oh,
So we did that for our girls, and we're gonna do that for the women, and we actually are creating a cape dress as well for the women, which is gonna
oh
be
my
really
gosh.
fun.
I cannot wait for this, and so this will be fall of '25 then?
Fall of 25, yes.
Okay, so we'll have to stay tuned for that. So, my final question is where can people find you? Let them know your website, social media handles. That way they can shop, they can follow along and support you.
So you may find us at rettajane.com. That's RETTAJANE.com. And then Instagram, it's rettajane.collection. And stay on our Instagram, follow us because we're always announcing where we're popping up next. We've got a great pop-up we're going to do for back to school in New York, so that's coming. But we're really starting to fill the calendar for the fall. So I have a feeling we'll be kind of peppering around a lot of places this fall.
Oh my gosh, I love that, and I am so excited for the women's capsule to come out too.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the Preppy Podcast today.
Oh, it was our pleasure. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much for listening to the Preppy Podcast. I hope this put a little prep in your step for the day. Please subscribe, rate, and review on wherever you listen to your podcast, and follow along with @the Preppy Podcast on social media.